Alrighty, guys. Good evening and good day to all who is listening today. So this is your boy Shrimp once again here to do my art grind. And once again, people, we're gonna go and do our best to 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 finish this design right now, if it's possible. But I don't know if I can do it because I'm kind of running out of time. But well. And I just realized that I put out the wrong thumbnail. Let me see. Let me just change this if I can change it right now. Excuse me. I think it's that. Ah, here we go. Yeah. So, I wonder why it didn't show up the other way. But yeah. So here we are in our part 10 of our art grind for this particular concept art. So here I will try my best to finish up the background that we're gonna go and tackle. So let me just get rid of this thumbnail, and sorry about the folders. Should have cleaned that up. Oh, and also that. Anyways, so yeah, okay. From what we left up, I kind of went and did the beach, and probably add some more over here on this side. And let me change my cursor. Here we go. And I'll add some more flavor on the castle over here, some blending, and add some rock colors because it's just pure brown over here. Needs to have some variation also. But yeah, the tent looks good. The sand, I think it needs a bit more work. And other than that, the foreground looks good. The rocks over here looks good. Character, I'll see what I can do if I can see something to patch up if I see it later. Maybe the arms. Yeah, I think the arms need some love. Okay. Okay, guys. So let us just continue with this design. And also I'm gonna go play the audiobook. I haven't prepared it yet. Let me just go and play well, here we are. We're in chapter 32 of The Dead Mage Who Doesn't Want a Fourth Time. So here we go. By the way, guys, if you want to listen to this on your own or read it on your own time, just check out on Novels.pl. They have a wonderful selection of novels if you want to go and browse their wonderful selection of web and light novels. For this particular video, I'm playing this The Dead Mage Who Doesn't Want a Fourth Time, and it's getting interesting, I may say. Now we're now in volume 2, and the title for this chapter is A Journey of Self-Discovery and Rank Up. So last time it was revealed that Vandali and his group of kobolds would be able to change their jobs in the new place that they arrive at. So let's see what we'll learn and what we can they're gonna unlock when they manage to get their jobs change when they change their jobs. Sorry guys for the words. But anyway, let's just get this video going. Enough talking, and thank you guys for coming here if you're watching this, and please leave a like and subscribe if you have the time, and show some love. So anyway, let's go.
Chapter 32, A Journey of Self-Discovery and Rank Up. Vandali was on his third day of rest, But the undead titans were busy at work, as if making up for all of the time that they had spent idle up until now. Lumberjacks cut trees. Titan, Jai. Int, holding their axes in both hands, the titans swung them into the trunk of a large tree. And then the tree, the monster that the tree had transformed into, screamed. The titans took no notice of the int swinging its branches around as a final act of resistance, and in the end, the felling of the int was complete. Boss. What are we doing with this tree? Titan, put it where we're gathering the timber. The holy sun is resting for now. Titan, Ruuja. Titan. The undead titans cut off the int's smaller branches and carried these along with the trunk to the place where the timber was being gathered. These titans had been lumberjacks while they were alive, and even though they were now only made of bones and rotting flesh, they worked at a brisk pace. We have to hurry and exterminate all of the other monsters in Talersheim. Titan, yeah, since the holy sun is here now. Titan, I want to hurry and go get the salt. Titan, they were working to clear the outer districts of Talersheim, which were being encroached upon by the forest of the devil's nests outside, and turn them back into ruins. Vandali, the holy sun, had told them that he would repair the buildings of Talersheim and restore them to their original state. Show him how we work. Titan, with the former lumberjacks leading the way, the titans defeated the monsters, attacking them to defend their territory one after another, cutting down the trees as they went. Before the titans discovered the tunnel leading into Duke Hartner's territory in the Orborn Kingdom, Talersheim had been a city-nation isolated from the outside world by the Boundary Mountain Range. The royal capital's population was 5,000, and there were only 3 small villages with populations numbering in the hundreds. Other than capable adventurers like Thesord King Bacchus and the Knights Order of the Church led by Thesaint Gina, there were no specialized military personnel or battle technicians. All of the soldiers, including the city guards, did those duties as their secondary occupation. They normally worked as miners or fishermen. Upon learning this, one would think that even for a country of titans who were born with great physical strength and sturdy bodies, their military strength was too low. But the reality was different. All of Talersheim's industries were dependent on the devil's nests and dungeons, other than its agriculture. Lumberjacks gathered lumber by felling ints, treants and hytriants in devil's nests and dungeons. Fishermen hunted aquatic monsters using tridents. Even miners would obtain metals from veins in devil's nests and dungeons that were crawling with monsters, so they had to fight and defeat the monsters in their way on their own. The vast majority of Talersheim's population of 5,000 was made of capable fighters possessing battle-related skills. Even the farmers, who should have been an exception to this, possessed enough fighting strength to kill any dangerous wild beasts that went after their crops with their bare hands. They were not to be laughed at. After learning these facts about Talersheim, Vandali and the ghouls wondered, why did the Mage Shield Nation pick a fight with a country like this? After all, over 90% of Talersheim's 5,000 civilians were combatants capable of killing a soldier of the Mage army in a single attack. Such powerful enemies would be waiting for them in a sturdy fortress of a city. It was as clear as day that any country that attempted to capture Talersheim would suffer several times the number of losses that the Titans would. Talersheim had few mages capable of using the Titans' unique magic, as Titans possessed little affinity for the various attributes of magic, but even the Mage Shield Nation's army was largely made of knights and soldiers. They didn't have many mages either. The Mage Shield Nation and the Amid Empire behind it seemed to have dispatched their troops after only looking at Talersheim's exterior appearance. They certainly hadn't done any detailed analysis on the city. As a result, though the Mage Shield Nation had been victorious, it suffered historically unprecedented losses, including the loss of a magic spear that was a national treasure. It was a foolish-sounding story, but regardless of these past events, the undead titans continued to clear Talersheim of non-undead monsters. Around this time, Vandali was in the ruins of the Adventurers Guild, reading a book. The archives of the Church of Vida and the small branch of the Mages Guild had either been set alight or plundered, but the archives of this place had been left alone. Even now, 200 years later, there were numerous books that were still intact. The church had probably been burned down because of the religious reasons behind the war, and though the Mages Guild was small, there was a chance that those of the guild had been conducting their own research, so the archives had been plundered. But there had been no reason to destroy the archives of the Adventurers Guild. Well, it could have simply been because the Mage Shield Nation had been forced to retreat before they were able to. And one of the undead titans had told Vandali that there should be a book in these archives about dampers. Incidentally, there had been a magic item left in the Adventurers Guild that was able to issue registration cards for those registered with the guild, but it couldn't be activated. It seemed that only guild personnel could use it. If Vandali had been able to register himself here, he would have been able to become an adventurer while keeping his title, skills and mana pool hidden, but life wasn't always easy. But investigating the details about his own race was more important. I can finally learn some things about myself. Vandali didn't know anything about himself other than the fact that he was born between the subordinate vampire Velen and the dark elf Darsa. He had always wanted to find out more about himself if he had the chance. First, he wanted to find out his life expectancy so he would know how long he could be expected to live. This would allow him to plan his life out. In the unlikely event that his life expectancy was shorter than a human's, it would be a big problem. He could extend his lifespan, using Earth transformation in himself, but if dampers turned out to be creatures that lived without aging and then suddenly died when they reached their 30th birthday, that would be problematic. It was unlikely, but Vandali wanted to know, just in case. I can really read it. Vandali's eyes followed the text as he inhaled the scent of old paper. He learned that dampers had the special characteristic of inheriting the qualities of their parents very strongly. The pattern of inheritance apparently grew even stronger when both parents belonged to races created by Vida. So that means I have quite a bit of talent in unarmed fighting and archery, just like my parents. It was possible that Vandali had an aptitude for archery like Darsa and Valen's unarmed fighting techniques that relied on his claws. It was unlikely that he would be able to use spiritual magic, however, as he didn't possess an affinity for the other attributes of magic. That would always be true unless spirits of the death attribute, which had never existed before, suddenly started appearing. Lemures were familiars created using Vandali's mana, they didn't count as spirits. Could it be I've inherited father's resistance to the sun as well? In that case, won't I be fine making my body structure more vampire-like by using blood-sucking to drink more blood? Newborn dampers possessed none of the weaknesses of vampires, but repeatedly using blood-sucking made their constitutions more like their vampire parents. As a cost to the power they gained by doing so, they gained the vampire's weaknesses as well. However, Vandali's father had been a man known to be resistant to the sun. And apparently subordinate vampires only possessed special vampire abilities related to the body, but they also possessed none of vampire's other weaknesses. This meant that Vandali could obtain the vampire's power at no risk to himself. Alright, I'll drink lots of blood from now on. Up until now, he had succumbed to the temptation of drinking the blood of the monsters whenever their corpses were being drained of blood. There was no particular reason to resist this temptation, and if it led to him gaining power, there was really no reason to hesitate to drink it. If he became able to fight with his claws like his father, his mother would probably be happy as well. And the main thing, the lifespan is dependent on the race of the parent that isn't a vampire. That was what had been written. The way dampers lived varied greatly depending on their parents, and their lifespans also varied depending on the race of the non-vampire parent. If the parent was a human with a lifespan of 100 years, the damper would live between 300 to 500 years. If the parent was a dwarf with a lifespan of 200 years, the damper would live between 600 to 1000 years. If the parent was an elf with a lifespan of 500 years, the damper would live between 1500 to 2000 years. As a general rule, it seemed to be between 3 and 5 times the lifespan of the non-vampire parent's race. Incidentally, all of these values had been deduced by researchers of the distant past who had used life attribute magic to investigate multiple damper specimens. The information's authenticity was a little questionable. However, it seemed that Vandali would be able to live for a long time as long as he wasn't killed. Now that I think about it, how long do dark elves live? Vandali wanted to ask Darsa, but she was currently asleep inside her bone fragment. He wandered around the archives, wondering if there might be a book written about dark elves, and fortunately he happened to find the book he was looking for. About a third of it had been rendered unreadable by mold, but he was able to find out the piece of information that he wanted. Dark elves were born as a race that the goddess Vida hoped would be stronger than elves, so all of their abilities are superior to those of elves. As such, their lifespans are long, they can live for 1,000 years in contrast to the 500-year lifespan of elves. At worst, Vandali would live 3,000 years, at best, 5,000. As long as he survived, he could becoming a living witness to history. A length of time longer than the entire Christian era. I can't imagine it. Vandali, his sense of time was just as it had been when he was a human, so he imagined that it could even become difficult to live for so long. At the very least, it seemed that it would be some time before he lived through the 4th lifetime promised to him by Rod Corti. I wonder what that god was thinking when he reincarnated me as a damn Well, he cursed me so that I would commit suicide in despair. I'm sure he didn't think about things like lifespans. Vandally, in fact, if he hadn't been able to use death attribute magic, he would have been finished the moment Dasa died. He wouldn't have had to even go as far as to commit suicide, he would have simply starved to death. Even in the book, it had been written that the majority of dampers died long before they reached the end of their lifespan. Considering that, Vandally could understand why he had been reincarnated as a damp. Now then, I wonder if there's a book about adventurers? Vandally, the Taylorsheim branch of the Adventurers Guild was supposedly set up here by the Orborn Kingdom's Adventurers Guild, so the systems used by the Taylorsheim branch should be mostly the same. The documents here were from 200 years ago, but since many races like dwarves and titans lived for over 200 years, things should be mostly the same other than some minor details. If the systems had changed drastically in the past 200 years, Vandally would just have to consider himself unfortunate. Here it is, it seems to be mostly the same as the Mage Shield Nations Guild. Vandally, the systems and rules weren't much different from what he had heard from Kika and spirits of the adventurers that he had killed. It seemed that guilds were the same even when they were in different countries. There were two differences. The first was the treatment of the races created by Vida, and the other was regarding the training school for adventurers. In the Orborn Kingdom's Adventurers Guild, some of the races created by Vida, such as Dark Elves and Titans, were treated as people. However, the races created when Vida procreated with monsters such as Lamias, Scylla, Arachne, Devils, and, notably, vampires, were generally considered monsters. This was because these races often harmed humans or had long histories of conflict against human countries. However, some friendly clans of these races also existed, and it was forbidden to harm members of clans that the nation had declared to be allied clans. Even though they're enemies with the Amid Empire, the way they treat the races created by Vida isn't the exact opposite. Vandally, considering the fact that the Orborn Kingdom had been trading commercially with Taylorsheim, it was difficult to imagine that the goddess Vida was thought of in a very negative way. And the Orborn Kingdom's relationships with each of the other races may have changed in the last 2,000 years. For now, Vandally decided that he would ask about these things once he entered human society. The next thing is regarding the Adventurers Training School. I never imagined that I'd be going back to school in another world. Vandally, in the Orborn Kingdom's guilds, there were educational institutions that trained adventurers, though such institutions didn't exist in the Adventurers Guild of the Amid Empire and its nations. That was because the Orborn Kingdom had more adventurers, and also more devil's nests and dungeons where adventurers worked. Of course, the fact that being an adventurer came with occupational hazards was the same in the Orborn Kingdom. If an inexperienced adventurer went on a reckless adventure and died, the responsibility wasn't on the country or the guild. People who became adventurers were people with great confidence in their abilities, or those who were very poor orphans, those who had lost their jobs while still young, or the third or fourth sons of farming or merchant families who had no chance of succeeding the family business. Those kinds of people. Though this was cruel to say, they were such people that society would not suffer a great loss if they died. However, in the distant past, a vast majority of newly registered adventurers died within a year of registration, and many retired before reaching D class or higher. It would be problematic if the Adventurers Guild was to build up a negative reputation due to these statistics and the number of capable adventurers stopped increasing. If the poor saw no hope in becoming adventurers and decided to turn to crime instead, that would also cause great problems for the nation. In addition to this, if there weren't enough people to thin the monster populations in the devil's nests, not only would there be a shortage of valuable monster materials, but the monster populations could even overflow, jeopardizing the nation's safety. And so the nation provided funds for adventurers' training schools to be established. The idea was to teach them at least a certain level of knowledge, train their fighting abilities, and thus reduce the rate of casualties among new adventurers. This experiment was a great success. The rate of newly registered adventurers dying within a year of their registration dropped by 80%, and the ratio of adventurers making it to D class and above increased several times over. In addition, the nation was able to use exceptional adventurers as special escorts and privately employed mages. Only good had come out of the establishment of these training schools. After reading this far, Vandally looked up from the book. I guess I'm a bad person for thinking that this bit sounds suspicious. Vandally, he could understand the rate of adventurers dying within a year of their registration decreasing, but what about the rate of adventurers dying within the second year? Just how much had the ratio of adventurers reaching D class or above increased by? In the first place, why were there no specific numbers given in the information? Well, whatever. The reason Vandali wanted to become an adventurer wasn't because of his ideals or because it was just his dream. It was merely the simplest way to secure himself a position in society, and he could even earn money by doing what he had been doing up until now, hunting monsters and bandits. Most importantly, it was the occupation that most easily allowed him to make a name for himself. And so Vandali ignored the dark side of the Adventurers Guild that he was starting to see, and lowered his gaze once more to read what had been written about the Adventurers Training School system. The schools were credit-based, and one could attend between 1 and 3 years. As long as one earned the minimum number of credits and had the headmaster's permission, he or she could graduate at any time. There weren't any particular requirements to enroll at the schools, only the entrance fees and tuition fees needed to be paid. There was even a deferred payment system for those who couldn't pay these fees in advance, where they would pay the fees off after graduating. And the most important thing for Vandali was how the school system dealt with minors. However, minors cannot advance to F class or above if they have not graduated from an adventurer training school. In the Adventurers Guild, adventurers were separated into 8 classes based on their abilities and past achievements. The lowest, G class, were newcomers who possessed only their registration cards. The only requests they could accept were non-combat related requests in the city, what would be referred to as manual labor in Japan. Even the pay was worse than in Japan. Requests that could possibly include combat, even if they were requests like gathering medicinal plants outside, could only be accepted at F class or above. Basically, if I want to aim higher and gain money and fame, I have to attend the Adventurers Training School since I'm underage. As Vandali was currently almost 3 years of age, he was, of course, a minor. He had decided that he would only go to the Orborn Kingdom after obtaining the resurrection device beneath Taylorsheim's royal castle and reviving Dasa, but he had no intention of spending more than 10 years doing that. Therefore, he would definitely still be a minor by the time he registered at the Adventurers Guild. School. I wonder if I can live an enjoyable school life this time? Vandali. He had no confidence at all to say that he could. During his childhood on Earth, even his uncle was forced to allow him to receive compulsory education, and when he was on the verge of entering high school, his uncle had pressured him by saying, "You're only allowed to choose from public high schools. And if you fail your exam, then go and work." But even so, Vandali had managed to attend high school. However, because of his family environment around the time he was attending elementary school, he was unable to invite friends over to play, and he couldn't even go to others' houses to play because he was scared of his uncle's fists. And he couldn't make any friends in the first place because of his strange behavior due to his abnormal emotional state. On top of that, the normal emotional state. On top of that, the teachers didn't think highly of him either, and though his grades were normal, there was an image of him being a problematic child. Things never changed as he entered middle school, and by the time he entered high school and was able to rebel against his uncle to some extent, he had already given up on a bright, enjoyable school life. Would he be able to make friends at this school? He still had no confidence that he would be able to interact well with anyone other than the undead and ghouls. I attract attention as a user of a newly discovered type of magic, and become someone that my schoolmates look up to. No, I can't imagine that. Vandali. He could only imagine his magic causing himself to be alienated and isolated even further. I'm fine with being alone. It's not like there are going to be any flashy school events, and since it's a credit-based system, if I don't find it enjoyable I can just get the minimum credits and graduate right away. Vandali. And then all he would need to do was gather money and fame by going hunting for monsters in dungeons with Sam and the other undead, right? He had plenty of friends. He was the Ghoul King, after all. In fact, wasn't he quite socially successful? Building up such defensive walls in his heart. He closed the book. He really didn't want to go to school. As he decided to go and play with Bone Man and the others to distract himself from his dark mood and put the book back in its place, another book caught his sight by chance. A Study on Undead? Vandali. Vandali picked up that book and decided to continue reading. The undead created by Vandali, including Bone Man, played and trained around Sam when not fighting. They would have practice battles against each other, dodge stones thrown at them by Bone Monkey, and enjoy Bone Bird's acrobatic flying displays. Bone Man, Vandali called out to Bone Man, who had been left behind by his companions as the only one unable to surpass rank 3. I found a way that might be able to make you stronger today, so I'm thinking of trying it out. Vandally, ja? Bone Man, with a bow on his back, a sword at his hip and the leather armor and shield as his defense, Bone Man looked like a splendid skeleton soldier, but the spirits inhabiting his bones were those of rats. Perhaps because of this, Bone Man's swordsmanship and shield technique skills were still level 1 and he seemed unable to increase them any further. After reading the book, Vandally thought that this might be the same reason that he was still rank 3 even though he had reached level 100. There are a number of conditions that might need to be met to create a powerful undead. The most common of these is for the spirits inhabiting the dead body to match the body itself, or otherwise possess a good affinity with it. In Lambda, there are cases where even after a dead body reanimated to become an undead, the spirit inhabiting the body is not the original owner of that body. Not only would the body be inhabited by someone else's spirit, but it is common for it to be inhabited by the spirits of small animals rather than a human. But in such cases, it would generally be a weak rank 1 or 2 undead. A human spirit possessing the corpse of a beast wouldn't suddenly gain the beast's reflexes and fighting instincts. In fact, it would take all of its effort trying to move in a body with a different bone structure. And if the beast possesses body parts that humans do not have, such as a long tail, wings or a second head, the human spirit would have too much to deal with. It is the same when animal spirits inhabited a human's body, they wouldn't be able to use its hands correctly unless they were very intelligent animals, and the spirits of quadrupedal animals would find it difficult to walk on 2 legs. Using tools would be out of the question. Perhaps it would be easier to imagine it as putting the brain of a human in a beast, and putting the brain of a beast in a human. Considering that, the rat spirits inside Bone Man could be considered exceptionally skilled. It wouldn't have been an exaggeration to call them geniuses among rats. Rats use their front paws skillfully, but even so, being able to use a bow and arrows, a sword and a shield was impressive. The rat spirits were clearly more intelligent than the average goblin. But unfortunately, there was a limit to their abilities. Well, since they were spirits, they could probably overcome those limits given hundreds of years, but Vandally wasn't willing to wait that long. And so Vandally thought, since Bone Man is a human's body with a rat's brain in it, if I add a human's spirit into it, doesn't that solve the problem? He would carefully select human spirits whose bodies had died long ago, whose empty souls wouldn't contain any personalities, emotions or memories. Fortunately, this place was a historical battlefield and it was simple to gather such spirits. Now then, I'm going to add more spirits. Vandally, judge you Bone Man. As Vandally inserted the fragments of spirits, Bone Man's body absorbed more and more, like a sponge sucking up water. Bone Man didn't seem to be suffering. In fact, his jawbone was clicking in pleasure and the fire in his eye sockets was flickering, so Vandally added more and more. Grrrr. Bone Wolf, Bone Bird. As Bone Wolf and Bone Bird watched their companion with curiosity, more spirits began to possess the human bones that made up Bone Man's body. And then it suddenly happened. Vandally, something seemed to click into place. It was the sensation of puzzle pieces being thrown randomly into a box and coming together by coincidence to complete the puzzle. My lord Bone Man. Bone Man's body didn't show any obvious changes like his body starting to glow or releasing an ominous presence, and its appearance was still that of a skeleton soldier, but somehow, the dull, rat-like noises he had been making were replaced by spoken words. Could it be, your rank increased? Vandally, some monsters' intelligence drastically increases when their rank increases. Though there are many cases where adventurers mistakenly attribute this to being the result of the experience gained by the monsters from leveling up or becoming smarter as a result of studying. But there are monsters that suddenly become able to use magic or speak words after leveling up. Many of those are undead. The reason for this was that the souls become accustomed to the dead bodies they inhabit and regain their memories and techniques. My lord. Bone Man gave a rat-like squeak instead of a yes in reply to Vandaly's question as he nodded. Because of your divine work, my lord, my rank has increased and I have become a rank 4 skeleton knight. Bone Man, he spoke in a rich, flowing, baritone voice that would likely be terrifying if he were to shout. The squeaking at the end of his sentence was a little disappointing, however. But where had his manner of speaking come from? His movements were unexpectedly refined. Perhaps there had been some knights of the Mage Shield Nation among the spirit fragments that Vandally had put into him, and that was the source of this. Vandally thought he had carefully selected empty souls so that Bone Man wouldn't be taken over by some strange malice or hatred, but it was possible that their memories had been restored when they fused with the spirits already inside Bone Man. It seemed that the Death attribute charm was taking its full effect, but if he were to behave like a knight of the Mage Shield Nation, that might cause trouble with Borkus and the other undead titans of Talersheim. Well then, have you regained your memories of your past life? Vandally. When Vandally asked to make sure, Bone Man nodded and replied, "Ja, I remember. It happened when I returned to my family with food to feed them. It attacked me and caught me by surprise. Unable to use any techniques, I was tormented, toyed around with, and then it abandoned me without even finishing me off. It had already satisfied itself after killing my family. Tormenting me was nothing but amusement. That fiendish cat. Bone Man. Cats do those sorts of things, don't they? Vandally. The idea that humans are the only ones that take lives needlessly. Upon hearing Bone Man's story, Vandally learned that this idea was only a fantasy. Leaving that aside, it seemed that the spirit fragments had only affected the tone of Bone Man's voice. He seemed to have no memories of the Mage Shield Nation, so there was nothing to worry about. Incidentally, Vandally liked both dogs and cats, and downing a pet one day was one of his dreams. But don't kill cats needlessly. Vandally. Certainly, my lord. Bone Man. It was good that Bone Man was so obedient. A future mass murder of domestic cats in the Orborn Kingdom had been avoided. Vandally wasn't sure whether there were domesticated dogs and cats in Lambda, however. Most of the day had passed already, so Vandally spent some time playing with Bone Man and the other undead. He enjoyed himself, throwing monster bones for Bone Wolf and Bone Bear to compete over and fetch, grabbing onto Bone Bird's legs to take a leisurely flight around the sky, and being groomed by Bone Monkey. Bone Man, Saria and Rita, who had returned from hunting, probably tilted their heads in confusion at the sight of Bone Man sprinting at full speed, letting out a war cry. Though they couldn't do so physically or visibly. Botchan, Bone Man is running. Why is that? Saria, some kind of training. It wouldn't be something like that, would it? Rita, Bone Man's cardiopulmonary function wouldn't increase by running around at full speed. I had an idea to build this and he seems to have taken a liking to it. Vandally, why? Saria, the rat spirits that act as Bone Man's base probably had some hamster-like traits. Vandally, hamster, as in star? Rita, inside a hamster wheel that Vandally had thought to build by using golem transmutation and some spare wood. Bone Man happily spent the next short while running to his heart's content. Name, Bone Man. Rank, 4 Ace, Skeleton Knight. Level 1 Passive Skills, Dark Vision. Superhuman Strength, Level 2 Enhanced Attribute Values, Loyalty, Level 1, New. Spirit Form, Level 1, New. Active Skills, Swordsmanship, Level 2, Level Up. Shield Technique, Level 2, Level Up. Archery, Level 2, Level Up. Silent Steps, Level 1 Coordination, Level 1 Commanding, Level 1, New. Bone Man's rank has increased after having new spirits added. Normally, skeleton knights are monsters created by knights becoming undead after death. Bone Man's base is made of rat spirits, but the fact that it has sworn loyalty to a specific person and the fact that the new spirits added to it included those of knights have caused it to become a skeleton knight. Though his outwards appearance is no different, his attribute values and intelligence have increased significantly, and though he previously could not level up some skills no matter how much experience he gained, he can now do so. In addition, he has gained the passive function of the Knight Job, enhanced attribute values, loyalty. This skill enhances the attribute values of the bearer as long as the bearer obeys the commands of the person he or she has sworn to serve, usually a lord. In Bone Man's case, his lord is Vandally. Skeleton Knights often possess martial-type skills and commanding skills at a high level and can become a rank 5 Skeleton General or a rank 6 Skeleton Lord by commanding subordinates. But in cases where they are employed, before or after death, by someone who rules an entire nation, such as a king or emperor, they become undead with court ranks attached to their names, such as Skeleton Baron. Chapter 33, A New Resolve on my 3rd birthday. In the mountain range that towered over the eastern and western sides of Talersheim, the capital of the sun, the champion Zakat had left behind mercury mirrors that he had created using secret alchemy techniques. The mirrors of liquid mercury reflected the sunlight towards the city, granting Talersheim the same amount of daylight hours as any place on level ground. And so their long, thin rice that could be harvested 3 times a year, similar to the rice of India on Earth, was cultivated, filling the stomachs of the race that needed large amounts of food. More than half of the country's territory was covered in devil's nests, but because of that, the crops grew quickly and yielded harvests 3 times as plentiful as crops growing in other lands. However, during the war with the Mage Shield Nation, the fields became grasslands ruled by monsters and all of the Mercury mirrors were destroyed. Leaving that sad history aside, Vandali was working on making something to play with today as well. King, what are you making? Child. Before he knew it, the Black Goblin, Anubis and Orcus children had gathered around him. Only a few months had passed since their birth, but not a single one of them was smaller than Vandali now. He had heard that monsters developed at a quick pace, but seeing it with his own eyes was a shocking thing. Hearing that the Black Goblins were actually developing slower than pure-breed goblins was even more surprising. Is it a weapon? Braga, not quite, Braga. Vandali, Braga, one of the Black Goblin children, thought that the wooden disc-shaped object that Vandali was shaping with his Skelem transmutation might be a throwing weapon like a boomerang, but it wasn't a weapon. I know, it's a plate. Zemedo, Bugo. To replace the leaves that Mum has been using recently? Gorba, Zemedo, a young Anubis with the tough-looking head of a dog, and Gorba, an Orcus who was already the size of the average human adult, guessed that it might be a plate, but that was wrong as well. Then what is it? Tell us too. Memadiga, Zemedo's older twin sister or younger twin sister? Memadiga, who was his twin sister either way, was curious as well. It's a toy, Vandali told her. A toy? Children, as his friends spoke simultaneously and turned their heads in confusion, Vandali adjusted the fine balance of the wooden disc. Finally satisfied with that, the last thing he did was to use what was inside a barrel that he had set aside rubber. He turned some of the rubber into a rubber glue and covered the disc in it so that it wouldn't hurt if it hit someone. It was quite unrefined, but it was finished. This is a toy called a frisbee. Vandali, what Vandali had created was a frisbee. He had thrown sticks when playing with Bone Wolf, but he had thought it might be more interesting to use a frisbee like people did on Earth. In Lambda, sports and toys were underdeveloped. Every country held tournaments for athletics and combat, and there were even dolls and stuffed toys. But there were no frisbees or sports that involved the use of balls. Well, they might be out there somewhere if one looked hard enough. And so Vandali had decided to try making one himself. Fortunately, there was more than enough wood lying around, and even more fortunately, there were rubber trees, so Vandali made rubber glumes from their natural rubber to use it for things like grips and cushioning material. This frisbee, you throw it, Vandali, hit people with it, and then you win by defeating everyone. Child, it's a toy that you throw, catch and throw back to the person who threw it to you. Vandali, as Vandali's friends seemed to have dangerous thoughts about the frisbee, he wondered if he should have made balls first. But he generally disliked ball sports, so he didn't have much desire to make them. Because he had been a loner at school, to him, ball sports had been nothing but pain inflicted onto him during physical education classes. They were nothing but a way to show off the achievements of popular people. For now, I'll show you the basics. Try throwing it. Vandali, that day, Basdia thought of calling out to Vandali after she got back from her session of monster hunting and training, and happened to come across this scene. Basdia, Vandali was chasing after a small disc that was spinning through the air. He caught the disc and then threw it back towards the children, who were standing far away from him. Is this some kind of training? No, he's supposed to be resting, so are they playing? Basdia thought for a moment that they were undergoing some kind of training where they were learning to catch a thrown weapon out of the air and throw it back at the enemy, but the atmosphere around them didn't seem like they were training, so she decided to stand there and observe. After observing a little, she understood that they were playing. But from just observing, she couldn't understand what could be so fun about it. Here it comes, King Orcus. The Orcus boy holding the disc gave a large swing of his arm and threw it. Because he possessed the superhuman strength skill that granted him great physical strength from birth, the disc flew high, very quickly. This is Vandali. It was impossible for Vandali to catch it. So Basdia thought, but Vandali ran at one of the nearby ruined walls and, without slowing down at all, began climbing it like a four-legged animal. She thought that he was using magic, but it seemed that he was using his claws. Van looks thin, but he has a lot of strength, and he's quicker than he himself thinks. As expected of the man I'm expecting to be the father of my second child. Basdia, giving a satisfied nod and thinking more positively of Vandali, Basdia decided that she would talk to him later and left so that she wouldn't be in their way. And thus frisbees became popular among the ghouls, black goblins and the Anubises in particular. But its popularity was dubious among the titans and Orcuses. There was currently a large amount of materials that had been brought into Talersheim. Over 90% of those were the products obtained by the undead titans who worked under Borkus to exterminate the influence of the exterior devil's nests from Talersheim. There were large quantities of monster meat, timber, medicinal plants, herbs and goods of Talersheim that the Mage nation had either abandoned or never found in the first place. Most of them were still usable. The rate at which more materials were brought in was faster than the rate at which they could be processed, so Vandali had simply cast preservation on them and they were lying in a huge pile. Among the quickly gathering materials were coins that were used as the Orborn Kingdom's currency 200 years ago, copper and silver coins of various sizes, things that had no use now. The Mage nation had probably taken gold coins and any coins more valuable than those, but the silver coins and coins worth less than them had been abandoned. If one were to polish these coins and take them to the Orborn Kingdom, they could likely be used as currency except for the badly damaged ones. The currency might have been revised in the past 200 years, but they would at least hold the value of the copper and silver that the coins were made of. If lucky, they might be worth a premium the way that old coins on Earth were valued by enthusiastic collectors. But right now, there was really no way to use them. What shall we do with these? Vandali, there is nothing to do with them. For now, let us store them somewhere until you go to the Orborn Kingdom, Vansama. Terra was getting her back rubbed by Vandali after having come back from changing her job to her original job off Armsmith at the job-changing room in the Ruined Adventurers Guild. Currency revisions are quite uncommon, so I believed that there should be no problem. However, I am not knowledgeable about the Orborn Kingdom. Even if you ask Kaka and the others are, there, harder Terra, you're right, they're enemy nations who have done nothing but wage war against each other, after all. Vandali, neighboring countries would normally have people going back and forth across the border, but unfortunately Viscount Balches's region, in which Kaka and the other former adventurers had been active in when they were still human, were not adjacent to the Orborn Kingdom. No, even in areas where the Mage nation and Orborn Kingdom shared a border, almost nobody did business across them other than black market dealers. These two nations had been enemies ever since their foundation, and apparently many of the Orborn Kingdom's duchies had been taken back as a result of a ghastly conflict that had occurred only a few years ago, so there was hardly an atmosphere to be doing business with each other. But if one were to question whether the nations still functioned properly, the answer was yes. The Amid Empire covered a third of the continent, half of the continent if one was to only consider the regions that were inhabitable by humans, and it did commercial business with nearby island nations and other continents. Thus, the empire had no economic problems or problems regarding the acquisition of food. The state of the Orborn Kingdom wasn't known, but it likely didn't suffer from any problems for the same reasons. The duchies had originally been individual small countries, and they were likely able to trade with nations outside the continent through the kingdom. Vandali had thought of taking the coins that he had taken from the bandits around Ivbeja to the Orborn Kingdom and exchange them there, but considering these facts, it would probably be better if he didn't. It felt like a waste, but it was probably best to simply melt them down into metal. I'll ask craftsman Datara later. Vandali, Datara was an undead titan who had been an elderly blacksmith when he was alive. He had continued swinging his hammer for 200 years, well, swinging his hammer, but not actually making anything. He had regained a little of his sanity and memories when he met Vandali, and now he was struggling to restore his workplace. His various tools had corroded, he wouldn't be able to work unless he made them all from scratch again. That is a good idea. I am still unable to use metal. Terra was a skilled armsmith with high skill levels. However, she was unskilled in the use of metal. Armsmiths in the world of Lambda mainly use materials taken from monsters to create their weapons and armor. They do not use metal very often, unlike the swordsmiths and weaponsmiths that one would imagine on Earth, who would forge metal to create swords and katanas. Even if they do, they would only use mithril powder or orichalcum fragments as catalysts, or use iron to make clasps for armor. The blacksmiths who primarily use metals are craftsmen who create arms using copper, bronze, iron, adamantite or orichalcum as the base materials, with materials from monsters used only as catalysts. The skills and tools used by the two types of craftsmen are different. In Terra's case in particular, she had trained her skills after becoming a ghoul in a devil's nest forest, where metal had been scarce. The last time she had used metal in her work was over 200 years ago. If I had the tools, as long as I am not needed to create something, I think that I would be able to at least melt down coins, you know? But if there is a specialist around, it is best to leave it to him. Terra, you're right. And Daitara would probably be angry if I didn't ask him to do it. Vandali, Daitara was a moody old man. If he were to discover that Vandali had given this task to Terra, who was unskilled in the handling of metal, he would get very angry indeed. And since he was now an undead, whose emotions often went out of control, there was a chance that this anger would be permanent. And moody old men in general seemed like they would be scary if they got angry. Still, how shameful of me to become over-enthusiastic and cause pain to my back. Terra, the friendly, 264-year-old Terra who looked like a friendly person in her teenage years had been rendered helpless by a back injury. Because the job-changing room in the Adventurers Guild was usable, all of the ghouls, including Terra, had acquired jobs. Jobs were blessings granted to people by the gods even before the appearance of the Demon King. Obviously, monsters couldn't undergo job changes. That applied even for Sam and New Aza, who had been people before becoming undead. However, ghouls were one of the races that Vida had given birth to alongside the vampires. They were half monster, but as the other part counted as human, they could undergo job changes. This was certainly the case considering that Terra and Kuka had retained the bonuses to their attribute values and skills of the jobs they had possessed as humans, even after becoming ghouls. And so the ghouls who had lived in a devil's nest up until now, unable to use a city's job-changing room or make one of their own, had used the job-changing room available to them in Talersheim. Thus, Terra was able to change from the job that she had been forced into when she was sold by her family and had long since reached level 100 in the prostitute job, to her original job of farm smith. Now I can become a renowned craftsman and artisan that I had dreamed of being as a human. Terra, she had been very happy. Renowned craftsman and artisan would be honorable titles given to skilled craftsmen on Earth, but in Lambda, they were the common superior jobs that all crafting-related jobs shared, including arms smith. These jobs would be displayed as artisan, arms smith or arms smith, artisan. And so in order to gain experience points and increase her level, Terra had begun working with unknown materials such as those from raptors and flying sharks, but she had been over-enthusiastic. I understand how you feel, you know. Vandali understood the feeling of being unable to acquire a job. He really did. As he said this, Vandali numbed the pain in Terra's back with death attribute magic, used spirit form transformation in a part of his body and slipped it into Terra's and eased the stiffening in her muscles. If I was able to do this on Earth, I might have been able to open my own store. Vandali, spirit form massages, we definitely understand your muscle pains better than low-frequency massages. Probably not. As Vandali released the tension in her muscles, he also secretly checked on the condition of her body, but there seemed to be no problems. There were no signs of declining organ function. Ah! Terra, had she noticed? I just suddenly thought of something. Can you not manipulate metal with golem transmutation, Vansama? I am sure that there are golems made of copper, iron and mithril. Terra, apparently not. It wasn't as if Vandali was doing anything bad, but he felt a little relieved as he answered Terra's question. I can. It uses up more mana than when I make golems from rocks, though. I've never had a chance to try it with mithril, but I think it should work. Vandali, like Terra, Vandali's exclusion from human society meant that his opportunity to work with metal was limited. However, he had tested it with small amounts of iron before, and he had succeeded in creating an iron golem that could fit in the palm of his hand. But I still can't do much other than make large changes to their shape. I can do things like make pit dwellings, fix houses made of stone and straighten bent pieces of metal, but for example Vandali used golem transmutation to change the shape of some copper coins and turned them into a sword. I see, this is no good. Terra knew that this sword would be useless with a single glance. It was nothing but a lump of copper in the shape of a sword. The blade had no edge at all, it wouldn't even be able to cut a branch. It was a thin, blunt weapon rather than a sword. This is how it is. I can't make a statue of stone and earth that resembles a person exactly, or apply fine details. Vandali, as he spoke, Vandali used golems of earth and stone to make a doll that resembling Terra, but while it did have the shape of a woman, the facial features were rough and details like the fingers were very crude. Using golem transmutation like this, he couldn't create small details. Even when constructing houses, he could only create pit dwellings. Building complicated, tall buildings like houses on Earth would be impossible. Even when making weapons, at best he would be able to have molten metal pour itself into a mold casting process. Even that was impossible unless the mold for the desired shape was already made for him. In order to become able to create smaller details, he would likely need skills like blacksmithing and carpentry in addition to golem transmutation skills. In fact, he had already acquired the carpentry skill by making pit dwellings using golem transmutation. That meant that he had gained the experience required to learn the techniques of carpentry. In other words, he had actively used the carpentry skill. Well, I can remove impurities from metal like this. Vandally, the copper sword began to quiver, and dust-like particles began to fall out of it right before their eyes. And then the sword of copper was shining brilliantly, as if it had completely transformed. This is copper. It shines like a gem. Vansama, this is amazing. If you are able to purify copper like this, and the same can be done with iron, this is a technique that would be desired all over the world. Terra, in Lambda, raising the purity of a substance to 100% was impossible with technology alone. There were almost no examples of even skilled earth attribute mages succeeding in doing such a thing. Historically, some mages had produced metal with 100% purity, but only with minute amounts of metal used to begin with. Such techniques could not be used industrially. And so if Vandally was able to create 100% pure iron, he would rival those skilled historical mages. No, there was a chance that he would surpass them. However, Vandally showed no signs of pride. That might be true, but this is actually really tiring. Vandally, it consumes a large quantity of mana, doesn't it? Terra, no, it really tires my brain out. Vandally lay down and rested his forehead against Terra's back. Feeling how hot it was, Terra let out her voice in surprise. A fever? Vansama, your forehead is almost hot enough to burn me. Terra, this is known as a magic fever. If you surpass the limits of your intelligence to force out a complicated spell, this is apparently what happens. Vandally, the intelligence stat displayed on one's status governs magic and martial techniques, representing the amount that one's brain can process, and the speed with which it does so. If those limits are surpassed, a fever is developed, like a Using golem transmutation to purify copper as Vandally had shown, Terra didn't consume much mana. Perhaps it would be different for other mages, but for Vandally, who possessed a mana pool of 100 million, it was a truly minuscule amount. What he was actually doing was middle school level science. He was simply transmuting the copper with the image of ejecting all of the non-copper material from within it. Though earth attribute mages manipulated minerals, they were unable to increase their purity. The reason for this was likely because they didn't understand the molecular structure of metals. Nobody could blame them, as this was a fantasy world with no electron microscopes. However, Vandally understood the concept of molecules. But increasing the purity of a single kilogram of copper to 100% had caused a fever intense enough to make his consciousness hazy, so the technique itself did indeed seem difficult. Or maybe my intelligence is just too low. I have a feeling there's a good way around this, but phew, Terra's back feels good. As Vandally set heat-absorbing demon fire around himself and pressed his forehead against Terra's back, he suddenly realized something. Come to think of it, Terra's Vandally. Yes, my what? Terra, upper arms are thick and muscular, aren't they? Vandally, that is where you want to touch? There are plenty of other good places, you know. If it is you, Vansama, I would not mind if your hand were to slip a little. Terra, other places your back is muscular too, isn't it? Vandally, though armsmiths didn't swing hammers like blacksmiths, they still used a considerable amount of physical strength. That was why Terra had more muscle on her arms and back than one would suspect, though few had noticed this due to her wearing clothes and ornaments that covered her back and upper arms to conceal it. No, why are you choosing only places like that? Terra was covering her face in shame, but Vandally had only meant it as a normal compliment. Muscles were splendid things. They were powerful justice, powerful beauty, powerful muscles. Even if one didn't have such extreme opinions, would lean muscles not be considered attractive? I don't need any more massaging, Oga? Terra, but perhaps squirming around with Vandally on her back had been a bad idea. Terra's hips gave an unpleasant clicking sound. There aren't any problems with the bones. You have a strained back. Vandally. Terra suddenly stopped moving, and Vandally used his magic once more to numb her pain and cool down the affected area. Strained backs were incredible, to even render a ghoul possessing the pain-resistance skill to become half unconscious. Incidentally, this was the first time the term strained back had been used in Lambda, and in the years and months to come, the term would spread from Taylorsheim all over the continent. But right now, nobody was aware of that. There you are, boy. So, Who is this lying down like that? Zadyrus, it's Terra, she can't move because she injured her back. Vandally, it was in the evening, which came early in Taylorsheim, when a lively-looking Zadyrus came to see Vandally. She injured her back, you say? As to be expected from an elderly person. Zadyrus, Kai, even though you are 30 years older than I am. I hope you get a strained back yourself. Terra, strained? Well, I do understand that you are cursing me. Zadyrus, though Vandally had numbed the pain, the injury hadn't actually been healed, so Terra was lying still to recover. As Zadyrus looked closely, she saw that Vandaly's arms had fused into Terra's back. What are you doing? Zadyrus, spirit form assimilation therapy. If I turn my body into spirit form and fuse it with Terra's, she becomes able to use my rapid healing skill. I can't use healing magic, but I tried to see if there was anything I could do and this is what I came up with. Vandally, foo-fufu, are you jealous? Vansama and I have become one. No, you cannot shake me. Stop it, you insolent little girl. Terra, I am only doing this because you show no respect for your elders. Good grief. Zadyrus, satisfied at making Terra scream after being teased by her, Zadyrus whispered into Vandaly's ear with a serious expression on her face. Is it her lifespan that is in danger? Zadyrus, no, she's just old. I can't see a shadow of death, so I think she'll be fine as long as she doesn't push herself. Vandally, she will, so that is impossible. Zadyrus, you're right. I'll ask her soon if she wants me to use a Outh transformation for her. Vandally, Terra hurting her back twice in a row might have just been something unique to Terra, but Vandally and Zadyrus suspected that it might be because she was aging. They might have been overthinking it, but it would be best to reverse her age and have her become healthy again long before the shadow of death became visible. Come to think of it, how is your training? Vandally, it is going well. I have become level 100, so I am due to change job again tomorrow. Zadyrus, the ghouls who had undergone job changes had acquired apprentice jobs to begin with. All kinds of apprentice jobs existed, such as apprentice warrior, apprentice mage, apprentice armsmith and apprentice maid. As their names suggested, they were apprentices, so the bonuses to their attribute values and skills were weak. However, the bonuses were spread widely over their skills, so everyone could take their own strengths and weaknesses into consideration as they trained and planned out what skills they wanted to obtain. Zadyrus and the other ghouls had increased the levels of their apprentice jobs to their limit in the space of just a few days, but they were a special case. Humans with apprentice jobs were normally not much different from average people. Beginning from this state, they would train with wooden swords and spears, have practiced battles, fight rank 1 monsters such as goblins, big frogs and living bones under the supervision of a mentor and slowly gain experience points. But ghouls were at least as strong as rank 3 monsters to begin with and already possessed numerous battle-related skills. Thus, they were able to kill monsters like needle wolves that human apprentice warriors would simply be slaughtered by, earning large quantities of experience points. Zadyrus had joined the other ghouls in defeating monsters such as flying sharks and raptors and promptly reached level 100 in the apprentice mage job. Incidentally, her level as a monster didn't increase. It seemed that experience points were split separately into job experience points and monster experience points. I know that you are eager to try, but you must be relaxing for now. It should be the date we promised, your birthday, by the time Terra's back is healed. Zadyrus, well, I don't know how it'll go, though. Vandally, with the cannot learn existing jobs curse, Vandally could not acquire a job that had already been confirmed to exist in Lambda. He wanted to try, so he was half full of expectations but also half full of anxiety at the fact that he might not be able to acquire a job. Well, in the case of the latter, he would simply have to concentrate on making the undead and ghouls stronger. Or, Vansama, is my back in such a bad state? Terra, not knowing about Vandaly's curse, Terra assumed that he was talking about her back, so he had to spend some effort in calming her down. And then Vandaly's birthday came. Vandaly was brought to the royal castle. Botchan. Please just think that you've been tricked and put this bag over your head. Saria, don't forget to use the blindfold and earplugs before that, okay? Rita. Vandaly froze as Saria and Rita approached him with a leather bag and a blindfold made of cloth. At first, Vandaly thought this might be a jikokuju, but this seemed to be a planned surprise, so he excitedly put on the blindfold and the leather bag over his head. From the outside, he looked just like a child being kidnapped. He's here. I took a lot of effort in bringing these here for you. Borkus. Me too. I brought in a lot of them as well. Vigoro, stop competing with each other already when we haven't even shown him yet. Bastia, after a while, things suddenly became noisy. Thinking that a bigger surprise was waiting for him than he'd originally thought, Vandali's heart began throbbing. Happy birthday! The leather bag and blindfold were removed. Vandali saw a great dining hall that had been built after Taylorsheim began trading with the Orborn Kingdom in order to hold buffet parties and balls like the higher societies of humans. Borkus, Vigoro, Zadirus, New Arza, Bastia, Terra and many others had gathered in this vast place. The dining hall had once been magnificent, but now it was ruined, a mere shadow of what it once was. As if to replace the decorations and ornaments that had been lost, a great number of corpses covered in colorful feathers and scales had been lined up around it. These are dinosaurs. Vandally, nobody knew their exact names and they were likely very different from the dinosaurs that had once inhabited Earth, but their bone structures were easily identifiable, those of dinosaurs at a glance. Corpses resembling Tyrannosaurus rexes, with enormous sharp teeth growing in their mouths. Corpses resembling pteranodons, clearly different from birds and bats. Corpses resembling triceratopses, with large horns growing on their heads. Corpses resembling stegosauruses, with sheets of bone growing on their backs and spikes on their tails. Some of their horns were chipped and their bellies had been sewn shut, they weren't unharmed. But they all seemed relatively fresh. This is our present. We heard from Mother that you wanted scaled monsters that weren't dragons, Van, so everyone gathered them here. Bastia, there were quite a few of them coming out of the dungeons. Though we've taken out their blood and organs, since they would have rotted otherwise. Vigoro, it seemed that the information that Vandali liked dinosaurs had been leaked by Zadirus. Well, perhaps because nobody had known what could be categorized as a dinosaur, enormous crocodile and snake monsters as well as a 3-meter-long cat-like carnivorous creature possessing sharp claws and teeth with scales covering its whole body were included in there as well. But this did nothing to inhibit the emotions that Vandali felt. Everyone thank you Vandali. He was moved to tears. He knew how hard it must have been to bring the monsters' corpses all the way back from the devil's nests and dungeons, even if their blood and organs had been taken out first. The cursed carriages he had made for crossing the boundary mountain range had probably helped, but even so, it wouldn't have been easy. Vandali Dasa's spirit appeared from the bone fragment that Saria brought forward. You know, during the time leading up until now, there were a lot of times when I thought that everything was over. Your father was killed, I was captured, but you still turned 3 years old. Thank you so much. Make sure you become even healthier and stronger from now on, okay? Dasa, Vandali had cried so many tears that it would be impossible to count them. Tears of anger, frustration, grief, misery, suffering, hatred, sorrow, resentment, rage, loathing. But this might have been the first time he was crying tears of happiness. What a pleasant feeling it was. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, everyone. Please keep taking care of me from now on. Vandali, that was why he would live on. And he would resurrect his mother. The tears of joy that he would cry after resurrecting her would surely be pleasant as well. There was no way that he would be killed. There was no way that he would die. As for anyone standing in his way, he would kill them, and make them his allies. Chapter 34, My first time getting a job, but I won't go into a dungeon yet. Munching on skewers of Tyrannosaurus rex and Triceratops meat, everyone other than Vandali drank the 200-year-old Taylorsheim made sake that had been found several days ago, while Vandali drank dinosaur blood instead. He raised the dinosaurs that had been given to him as presents as zombies to turn them into a moving dinosaur exhibition. And so his third birthday was enjoyable for everyone, even without a cake. Vandali asked Dasa and the former adventurer Kaka, but it seemed that the cakes as Vandali knew them didn't exist in Lambda yet. Though milk existed, there was no fresh cream, and though bread existed, there was no fluffy sponge cake. Cakes in Lambda were apparently pieces of bread made of wheat flour with large quantities of butter, sugar, jam and honey spread over them. If possible, Vandali wanted to make a cake with plenty of whipped cream for his next birthday for everyone to enjoy, but he was lacking the essential ingredients of wheat and milk. Perhaps treasure chests and storage rooms in dungeons could contain wheat seeds and milk. The Titans of Taylorsheim hadn't domesticated animals like cattle and horses. They hunted monsters for meat, and as for labor strength, the Titans themselves were stronger than farm horses and cattle. The only things they domesticated were bird-like monsters called gigas, which were apparently a replacement for chickens. They were about as large as Titan children, in other words, just a little smaller than the average human. Apparently they laid an egg every day. Incidentally, there were carnivores that possessed sharp beaks and talons. As rank 2 monsters, they were not particularly strong, however. When I was alive, I used to put a raw giga egg in my mug every morning and drink it up. Porcus laughed as he said this. Incidentally, the eggs were apparently of similar size to ostrich eggs. The domesticated gigas had either perished or run away during the war 200 years ago, but apparently they still inhabited the devil's nests and dungeons now, so they decided to capture some and start breeding them again. Fortunately, there were mountains of meat to use to feed them. Huh? What was I thinking about again? Oh yeah, cakes. Eggs are necessary to make cakes, and I also need dash. Holy sun, what is the matter? You have been loitering in front of the door for some time now. New Arza. Vandali had been escaping from reality while standing outside the room used for the job-changing ritual in the building that had once been the Adventurers Guild, but New Arza's voice brought him back to reality. Ah, no, I was just thinking a little about the future Vandali. I see, that is a good thing. However, were you not intending to undergo the job-changing process today? New Arza. I haven't finished my mental preparations. Vandali. There were no requirements for the job-changing ritual. If the Adventurers Guild was functioning correctly, he would normally pay a fee to the guild to use the room. Afterwards, he would submit the guild registration document, his guild card. But in these ruins, there was no need to pay or submit anything. He simply needed to enter the room and place his hand on the crystal ball in the center of the magic circle inside. And then he would choose from the list of jobs displayed inside his head. And then it would be over. He didn't need to register himself on an employment website, apply for a job, write a resume and attend an interview. Well, that was totally natural, as this was quite a different kind of job change. It was once explained to me that jobs are engraved onto the soul, but there is no pain involved. New Arza, wrongly assuming that the cause of Vandali's nervousness was a misunderstanding of the process. New Arza smiled as he said this. It was probably a smile. It merely looked like the skin of his dried face was stretching, however. Vandali couldn't comment on the facial expressions of others. And even though he paced back and forth in front of the door, it did nothing but pass the time. You're right. Well then, here I go. Vandali. And so he had New Arza open the door and then entered the room. The room had nothing inside other than a magic circle drawn on the floor of the room with a round crystal ball that had been set on a pedestal at its center. The crystal ball had a constant, faint glow, giving off a mysterious feeling. Now then, will any jobs appear for me? Vandali. He gently floated into the air with flight and reached out for the crystal ball. He wouldn't have been able to reach the crystal ball otherwise, as it had been placed at a height appropriate for titans. Come to think of it, the long-armed Vigoro and the taller women like Bazdio would have been able to reach this crystal ball. But just how had Zediris managed it? Perhaps she had used wind attribute magic to fly. Vandali touched the crystal ball with such meaningless thoughts running through his mind, and words appeared in his mind in the same way as when he opened his status screen. Jobs that can be selected: death attribute mage, golem transmuter, they're there. Vandali was so surprised that a job change would be possible for him that he accidentally undid his magic. He fell onto the floor. He had thrown his head back reflexively, so the back of his head hit the floor with full force. His danger sense, death, gave him a warning. Children's skulls are fragile things. Holy sun, I heard something. Holy sun? Are you alright? New Arza. Vandali stayed on the floor while waiting to recover with his rapid regeneration skill and the no attribute magic spell, healing power enhancement. New Arza, surprised to hear a noise, entered the room and gave a reaction as if he were the first one to discover the scene of a locked room mystery. As he rushed towards Vandali, Vandali waved his hand to signal, I'm fine, just leave me as I am. Since Vandali had hit his head, he didn't want to be moved until he had recovered. After overcoming various difficulties, Vandali had sworn yesterday on his 3rd birthday that he would live on. Despite that, he almost met a foolish end by hitting the back of his head on the floor out of surprise. Having managed to avoid that, he touched the crystal ball once more. Jobs that can be selected: death attribute mage, golem transmuter. His potential jobs were really displayed there. He had thought his chances of being able to undergo a job change to be slim because of his curse, but there were even 2 different jobs that he could choose from. He would normally be happy about this, but is this some kind of trap? Vandali, resisting the inner urge to dance with joy, Vandali calmly considered the situation. Rod Corti, who had cast the cannot learn existing jobs curse on Vandali, had wanted Vandali to fall into despair, give up on his vengeance and commit suicide. Wasn't it strange that it was possible for him to obtain a job so easily? Now that I think about it, why am I even able to undergo a job change at all? The same thing goes for the curse that prevents me from obtaining experience points independently. If he wanted me to fall into despair, he should have just cursed me so that I can't level up or undergo a job change. If Vandali had been prevented from leveling up and gaining a job at all in the first place, there wouldn't have been any loopholes. He would be like a monkey that couldn't grow wings and fly no matter how hard he tried. Could the fact that Rodcorti hadn't done this be part of some kind of ingenious trap? Would he eventually be cornered if he picked one of these displayed jobs now? Perhaps they would offer pitiful bonuses for his attribute values and cause him to gain passive skills that only serve to hinder him. Vandali didn't know if they existed or not, but shortened lifespan or luck would be bad passive skills to have. Skills couldn't be directly sealed away once learned in this world, so it would be a huge problem to gain such skills. But then, would Rodcorti set such a roundabout trap? Everything that this god had done so far was setting up the fundamentals in a sketchy way and then leaving everything else up to the people that he reincarnated. He was certainly not an all-knowing, omnipotent god. It was normal in this world for people to possess levels and acquire jobs. Looking it the other way, if something didn't have levels or jobs, it wasn't a person. Rodcorti had set things up so that the people he reincarnated, including Vandali, would reincarnate in Lambda after dying in Origin. It was likely that he was unable to make Vandali, who was already set to be reborn in Lambda, an exception to the rules that people possessed levels and jobs. Wasn't this the reason why the curses that had been placed on Vandali were unable to gain experience points independently and cannot learn existing jobs? Even a god couldn't ignore a world's rules, which was possibly why the curses had ended up like that with loopholes in them. Also, Rodcorti didn't exist in the world of Lambda himself. He did govern the circle of transmigration for reincarnating the dead, but his name didn't appear anywhere in the myths of this world. So it was possible that he could only look down at Lambda from a distance, and he might not even be particularly knowledgeable about the world. In other words, I'm able to make use of these large loopholes because Rodcorti is crude and ignorant, I guess. Vandali, he felt suspicious and precautious when he remembered Rodcorti from time to time, but in the end, he arrived at the conclusion that gods weren't all-powerful. The next thing he thought was unusual was the fact that jobs that weren't particularly creative that nobody had acquired before had appeared for him even though he hadn't done any training to obtain these jobs. But after thinking for a while, he realized that it wasn't unusual at all. My death attribute magic is a type of magic that has never existed in Lambda before. Considering that, I guess it's not strange for there to be jobs that nobody has ever acquired before, either. Vandali, the job system had been created by the gods, but that didn't mean that the gods had created every single job themselves. It was a system that had existed for well over 100,000 years, after all. For example, the aristocratic system hadn't existed in the age of the gods, so jobs such as knight and holy knight also hadn't existed. In the future, if someone reincarnated from another world invented guns with gunpowder in this world, jobs like a musketeer and gunman would appear. Though Vandali had been surprised that the golem transmutation skill had never been used in this world before. How were golems created in this world, then? Vandali puzzled over this as he wasn't particularly knowledgeable about golems in Lambda, but deciding to find that out later, he turned his attention to other things. So the problem is, which do I choose? But Vandali, death attribute Mage and golem transmuter. Neither of them had apprentice at the start of their names, so they should both be fairly difficult jobs to level up. The bonuses that Vandali would obtain from them would probably be large to compensate for that, but it would likely take him between several months to a year before he could undergo the next job change. He could assume that the death attribute Mage job, as its name suggested, would put an emphasis on the use of death attribute magic. Jobs with names that consisted of attribute plus Mage existed for other attributes as well. The Mage jobs of other attributes provide large attribute value bonuses to mana and intelligence, but the bonuses to other things are small. Most notably, they provide almost no bonus to strength. As for skill bonuses, they provide a large bonus to the attribute of magic in the job's name, a moderate bonus to magic-related skills such as mana control and a small bonus to magic of the other attributes. On the other hand, they make it more difficult to acquire martial-type skills. Assuming the death attribute Mage followed the same pattern, this job would be the correct choice as it would increase Vandali's skill with the death attribute magic that he had been using up until now. However, it would make it take longer to acquire non-magic skills. Thegelum Transmuter job had no analogous jobs, so nothing was known all about it. It would likely provide a bonus to Thegelum Transmutation skill. Vandali didn't know what bonuses it would provide to his attribute values. He did think that it would provide a bonus to his intelligence, however. Thegelum Transmutation skill was a convenient skill that he had used well up until now. He wouldn't stop using this skill 10 years or even 100 years from now. I'll choose Edith attribute Mage. Vandali, after considering his options, Vandali chose Edith attribute Mage. His goal right now was to defeat the dragon golem beneath the royal castle and obtain the resurrection device. That was why he chose to prioritize improving his death attribute magic, which would be more directly useful in battle. He would soon obtain the alchemy skill, and since Thegelum Transmutation skill was something that originated from death attribute magic in the first place, it was possible that the Death attribute Mage would provide a bonus to it anyway. As he selected his job, the words Golem Transmuted Eyes appeared from inside his head, and the words Death attribute Mage grew larger. And then he felt the sensation of something growing hot deep inside his chest. This is more amazing than I thought it would be. Vandali, there was so much power filling up his whole body that Vandali couldn't help but to let out his voice. In particular, his head had become wonderfully clear, as if his brain cells had undergone a software version upgrade. The levels of the Death attribute magic skill, the No attribute magic skill, the Chant revocation skill, the Mana control skill and the Spirit form skill have increased. You have acquired the alchemy skill and the automatic mana recovery skill. And thanks to the announcements in his head, he realized that many of his skills had leveled up and he had gained some new ones. In a single moment, the Death attribute magic skill that hadn't increased past level 3 despite being used thoroughly as well the skills that had stayed at level 1 for a long time had increased, and he had even learned the alchemy skill that he had been training for almost a year now. The skill bonuses that a job provides are amazing. Vandali experienced the reason why the ghouls had been in a daze after undergoing their job change. He opened his status to check his attributes and skills to see. Name, Vandali race, Damper, Dark Elf age, 3 years old title : Ghoul King job, Death attribute Mage level, 0 job history, non-attributes, Vitality, 50 mana, 124,906,320 strength, 45 agility, 22 stamina, 49 intelligence, 112 passive skills, superhuman strength, level 1 rapid healing, level 2 death attribute magic, level 4, level up. Status effect resistance, level 4 magic resistance, level 1 dark vision mental corruption, level 10 death attribute charm, level 4, level up. Chant revocation, level 2, level up. Chant revocation, level 2, level up. Strength and followers, level 5, level up. Automatic mana recovery, level 1, new. Active skills, blood sucking, level 3 surpass limits, level 3 Golem transmutation, level 3 no attribute magic, level 2, level up. Mana control, level 2, level up. Spirit form, level 2, level up. Carpentry, level 2, level up. Engineering, level 1 cooking, level 1, new. Alchemy, level 1, new. Curses, experience gained in previous life not carried over, cannot learn existing jobs, unable to gain experience independently. My attribute values increased by more than I thought they would, and my new skills are there. Vandali, he had heard that major type jobs didn't provide much of a bonus to vitality and strength, but they had increased by about 10%. Even if he took into account that some of it might be related to his race and that his body was still developing, it was still a considerable amount. Notably, his intelligence had reached 3 digits. No wonder his head felt clearer. And though this was bonus had little impact as Vandali's mana pool was over 100 million to begin with, it had increased by another 10 million. Job changes were amazing, providing 10 million mana just by acquiring the job. The bonuses to attribute values were probably calculated as a percentage of the original values. In the case of Vandali's mana, it had increased by around 10%. His skills had increased as well, and he could even feel it in the flight that he was using now. Up until now, he had always had the option of floating lightly like a jellyfish or forcibly using his mana to fly at a high speed, but now he felt as if he could fly more efficiently. The increase to the level of his mana control skill probably had something to do with this. He wanted to skip with joy, but he apparently looked insane when he tried to skip, and he wanted to avoid being forced to rest some more. And so Vandali quietly lowered himself to the floor and left the room just as quietly. Now then, the next thing to do was level up. With that said, because of Vandali cannot gain experience independently curse, his level wouldn't increase no matter how many monsters he defeated. Therefore, he would have to visit devil's nests and dungeons with his undead subordinates. He hadn't created any new undead companions since he started living with Zadyrus and the other ghouls, so he wondered if he would be alright with the same members as before. But there was an unexpected rush of people wanting to accompany him. It's your first time visiting the devil's nests and dungeons around here, right? Then it'd be best if a veteran like me guides your way. The A-class adventurer, Thesord King Bacchus, will teach you the structures of the dungeons and the most efficient way to earn experience points, so just follow me. Bacchus, what are you saying, Master? If you do that, you'll end up killing the ones that the Holy Sun's supposed to kill as well. Holy Sun, if it's monster hunting you're after, leave it to me. The scout Zran. Zran, no, what he truly needs is a healer. The Holy Sun can heal his undead, but the only magic he has to heal himself is no attribute magic. Though I am still inexperienced, please leave this to me, New Arza, as I am able to use life attribute magic. New Arza, as if trying to make the best first impressions possible, the undead titans appealed to Vandali one by one, trying to convince him to let them accompany him. The number of applicants was all of them. Now that I think about it, you've never come on a hunt together with me, Van. How about taking this opportunity? I can teach you unarmed combat techniques, too. Bastia, no, it should be me doing that, since I'm the one who's teaching Saria and Rita, right? Vigoro, hey, aren't you interested in how adventurers fight? If you're happy with me, I can teach you. Kaka, then me too. Ghoul, well then, me as well. Ghoul, and so the ghouls came to convince him as well. I wanna go too. Braga, me too. Zemado, I also want to go. Memadiga, Fuga. Gorba, even Braga, Zemado, Memadiga, Gorba and the other monster children raised their hands. Would the fetus inside the live dead raise its hand as well? Vandali was so popular that he almost started fantasizing that this would happen. It was only June, but their enthusiasm was like the middle of summer. Was this a Motki? Was it really a Motki? You children can come later. After you become after you gain more skills. Vandali. If Vandali were to carelessly say comma after you become adults, they would definitely reply comma but you're still a child, king exclamation mark, so he quickly corrected himself. In fact, the Black Goblin Braga was already bigger than Vandali. Okay. Children. The children were surprisingly obedient. Even though their bodies were larger than Vandali's, his attribute values were still higher, and they hadn't finished learning their skills. However, what other criteria would he need to use to choose who would accompany him? Both the undead titans and the ghouls were far more experienced in combat than Vandali. They could fight much better than he could, as he just used his mana to brute force his way through battles. This had been fine up until now, but he would need to learn an effective way to fight and coordinate with his allies in order to defeat that dragon golem. And any of the ghouls and titans could become his teachers. Of course, they had plenty of fighting strength. Vandali was planning to clear a D-class dungeon first, so bringing Bacchus or Vigoro would be overkill. Vigoro would be of the same or higher rank as the dungeon's boss. As for Bacchus, any monster in a D-class dungeon would be small fry for him, including the boss. Right, let's decide this with Reversi. Vigoro, bring the boards and pieces. Bacchus, no, wait a moment. With this many people, it would take days to make a decision with Reversi. Vandali, while Vandali was contemplating, it seemed that everyone else wanted to settle things with a Reversi tournament. Now that things had come down to this, perhaps it would be best for him to use Eglum transmutation to make a lottery system. Boy. Zadyrus, as this thought occurred to Vandali, Zadyrus suddenly ran up to him. Was she hoping to accompany him as well? Bilder has gone into labor. Zadyrus, so he thought, but it was an urgent report. How is she? Vandali, Bilder had become pregnant in September last year. Now it was late June. It was a little short of the normal duration of pregnancy, but it wasn't a fatally premature birth. Vandali had been periodically monitoring the condition of the unborn babies using spirit body transformation in place of ultrasound scans, so there shouldn't have been any problematic diseases like in medical dramas, so he was calm. He was calm, But Balder was finally giving birth after Vandali had dealt with the ghoul's low fertility and used magic to prevent miscarriages. There was no way that he could be uninterested by this. There should be no problem. Well, this is her first childbirth, so this could take some time. Well then, let us go. Zadyrus, I'm sorry? However, he hadn't expected that he would be dragged along to the event. Zadyrus suddenly picked him up and took him with her. As to be expected of the ghoul chief possessing the superhuman strength skill, even though she looked like she was in her mid-teenage years. Ah, but we haven't come to a decision yet. Baucus, well, I guess it can't be helped with these circumstances. Vigoro, and so everyone watched Vandali leave. What was it that couldn't be helped? Botchan, if a man shows weakness at a time like this, you will be dominated, so I humbly suggest that you take a firm attitude. Sam, why would Balder dominate me? Vandali and Balder weren't married, nor was the child in her belly related to him. Botchan, do your best. Rita, no, the one giving birth is Balder, not me. Vandali, both Sam and Rita seemed to be seeing Vandali off. Saria was waving her hand. What position are you calling me to take? Vandali, since there were no problems with Balder's health, there shouldn't have been a need for Vandali to be there, since he didn't have any specialist knowledge in regards to maternity and gynecology, nor was he a midwife. If there is a sudden emergency, I want you to help. Also, Balder said she wants you to hold her hand. Zadyrus, the position of doctor and husband? I understand. Vandali, ghouls didn't have the concept of marriage, so Vandali would just think of it as Balder relying on and trusting in him. And he was the ghoul king, after all. Vandali was content with that. Well, this was an adventure in itself as well. Childbirth was life-threatening even on Earth, where medical science was more advanced. This wouldn't earn him any experience points, however. Chapter 35, A New Life Has Been Born, so let's adjust our living environment. The room that Zadyrus had prepared for Balder's childbirth was one of the countless rooms in the ruins of Talersheim. The room had been cleaned and a rug made of the soft fur from a needle wolf's belly had been laid out on the floor, and Balder was lying on top of it. First sterilization. Balder, are you alright? Vandali, there were 3 other ghoul women in the room other than Balder. They were likely women who had experienced childbirth before, acting as midwives. Vivan. Balder. Probably due to the pains of labor, Balder's breathing was rough and there was sweat on her forehead as she realized that Vandali was there and reached a hand out towards him. Vandali took that small hand that was still bigger than his own, and she gave his hand a squeeze. I'm going to do my best and give birth to a healthy baby, okay? Balder. What was a man supposed to say in response to this? This was a difficult question to answer in Vandali's position. He was aware of his own expressionlessness and flat tone of voice, so he thought he might come off as cold if he just said, do your best, so he hesitated. Trying to sound as reassuring as possible, he said, it's alright, I'm here with you, so just relax. Vandali didn't have a doctor's license, nor had he ever witnessed childbirth before, so he didn't know what exactly was alright or on what grounds Balder could relax, but encouraging her was the top priority right now. In fact, his expressionlessness was convenient in situations like this. His lack of confidence didn't show on his face. Okay. Balder. It seemed that Vandali had succeeded in encouraging her. She definitely seemed to be in pain, but she still smiled. When Vandali thought about the fact that had made her smile, the pain of her claws digging into his right hand seemed to be a trivial matter. They pierced his skin. But he could see a faint shadow of death on her face. Control your breathing, short breaths in, long breaths out. Midwife, check your status if you can. Has your vitality dropped? Midwife, I will make sure to deliver your baby. Rest assured. Zadyrus, looking at everyone else, Vandali realized that Balder wasn't showing any strangeness or visible signs of her condition worsening. She showed no signs of being ill, and there shouldn't have been anything abnormal with the baby, either. I'm going to examine you a little, okay? Vandali. But Vandali could definitely see the shadow of death. So he used spirit form transformation to transform his unoccupied left arm into spirit form and placed it inside Balder's abdomen. And then he found that the umbilical cord had wrapped itself around the baby's neck. At this rate, the baby would be strangled. I'm glad Zediris called me over here. Vandally, thinking this, he loosened the umbilical cord from around the baby's neck, though it would have been easy to do it with his right hand. How is everything, boy? Zediris, it's fine, I've resolved it. Vandally, the bones of Vandali's right hand were creaking and Bilder's claws had dug into it so that her paralyzing venom was entering, but there was now no problem with the mother or the child. All right. The rest is up to your effort, Bilder. Zediris. After that, just as Zediris said, the childbirth continued with Bilder's efforts while Vandally offered her encouragement while having his right hand squeezed. It took 6 hours for the child to be born, and Vandally learned just how great the mothers of the world were. A grey-brown baby with a wrinkled face. She was the first new ghoul born into the ghoul community in a long time. Look, it's a girl. I can't give your whole name to her, Vandally, but is it alright if I borrow half of it? Bilder was holding her child, looking visibly exhausted but incredibly happy. Vandally was fine with it, but would the child's real father not mind? Bilder looked so happy that Vandally was hesitant to ask. I don't mind. Vandally, and so this was the reply he gave. Vandally would ask about this later to learn that newborn ghouls were generally named by their mothers, or their names would be decided after consulting with the chief of the tribe. Since Bilder was the mother, nobody would say anything about her decision to give her child half of Vandally's name. Will you hold her? Bilder, with pleasure. Vandally, now he took the peacefully sleeping baby with both arms. The bone fractures of his right hand still hadn't healed and it still didn't move very well after having paralyzing venom-secreting claws piercing it for hours on end. So he took the baby with his left arm and placed her on top of his knees. She's light and very warm. Vandally, the baby's body felt very light to Vandally. But this baby would grow up and live for 300 years. As this thought occurred to him, he got a sense of how mysterious life was. The birth of a new life was an emotionally moving event. Vandally felt this for the first time in his 3 lifetimes. When he had lived on Earth, even when watching that kind of documentary that told him, this is how a new life is born, his only reaction to that was, after all, he was just watching a complete stranger on a screen or the birth of an animal, so he hadn't felt emotionally moved at all. But he had experienced death twice, including the time after he became an undead, 3 times. And now that he was trying to bring Darsa back to life, he could really feel the emotion of this event. He decided to do everything he could to protect this child. He wasn't the child's father, but he was the Ghoul King, after all. And so I'm postponing my trip to the dungeons. Vandally, Orcus and Vigora made lonely-looking faces when Vandally told them this, but they understood that it couldn't be helped. The remaining 9 women would give birth one by one in the near future. If an unexpected situation arose while Vandally was in a devil's nest or dungeon, he wouldn't be able to deal with it. It's been so long since I've heard a baby crying. Vigoro, you can take your time to calm down first, but make sure you show the baby to us as well. Orcus, for a new life to be born in these ruins that were merely waiting to turn into dust, this is a truly happy event. New Arza, how great, now we can have some drinks. Titan, if there's any alcohol to be had. Titan, there is, though it's not very tasty. Titan, for Vigoro and the other ghouls who had been troubled by their problem of low fertility, it was clearly a happy event, but even Borkus and the other undead titans were truly genuinely happy to see the birth of this baby. Incidentally, one might have questioned whether it would be hygienic to allow the baby near the undead, but it wasn't a problem. Vandally had already cast sterilization, bug killer, deodorization and preservation spells on all of the undead titans. Once a drain system was established, Talersheim would become a fortress city as hygienic as any city of the Amid Empire. There were relatively few people living in the city considering its size, so it would never lose the feeling of being a ghost town, however. Also, I want to strengthen Talersheim's defenses and use Ilkama to make the magic item that will increase the ghoul's fertility. I'll leave the adventures and training for in between those. Vandally, those dedicated to the path of being a warrior or a mage might have scolded him for his lack of dedication, but nobody here scolded Vandally. Alright. We'll just decide on the order we'll do things here. Vigoro, this is perfect. Nobody's gone into the dungeons for 200 years, so who knows what they'll be like inside. The number of monsters will probably have increased, so I'll thin them out for you. Orcus, it could be that they have been abandoned for so long that new, unknown levels have appeared in them. What will we do about the unarmed fighting lessons? For now, I suppose we'll go over the basics. Bastia, Jaya. My lord, in that case, I shall increase my level and work hard to catch up to my companions. Bone Man, we'll be taking this time to learn our skills as well. Child. In this moment, Vandali realized once again just how much kindness he was surrounded by in this third lifetime of his. The first thing to do was to create the magic items to fix the ghoul's fertility problem. Strengthening Talersheim's defenses would have to be done after the forest devil's nest was completely removed from the city, otherwise they would be up to their necks in raptors and needle wolves. Holy Sun, please give us a few more days. So he was told. It seemed that the problem was indeed the number of monsters, not their strength. Though the needle wolves weren't problematic, the raptors were intelligent enough to run away if they knew they couldn't win a fight, so exterminating them was likely very difficult. I am thinking of making two kinds of magic items. Vandali, one to make the sperm and egg cells survive longer, and the other to prevent fetuses from dying before they reach a certain size. If I recall, creating magic items with both functions would be difficult, after all. Zadyrus, in the building next to the temporary maternity room, Vandali was discussing the creation of the magic items with Zadyrus, Terra, Basdia and several other ghoul women. Regarding that, I'm thinking of making the magic item that makes the sperm and egg cells survive longer, something that is easy to put on and take off. Vandali, indeed, if it was something that stayed on permanently we would produce children endlessly. Terra, you're right, it'll be hard for everyone's habits to suddenly change. Basdia, up until now, ghouls had experienced difficulties in getting pregnant, and even if they did, most of their children were not born successfully. Because of this, they had no marriage system and it was natural for their society to do their utmost to try and create children. Even after Bilder and the others became pregnant, they hadn't shown any signs of holding back. Even if Andali were to create the magic items, they wouldn't suddenly say alright, let's do proper family planning from now on. There were no convenient contraceptive devices or pills like on Earth, so that would make this only more difficult. Well, there wouldn't be problems in having a large number of children for a while. In fact, it would be a good thing. Talersheim still had plenty of space and there was a near-endless supply of food. However, reproducing to the point of filling up all of the land would be a problem. Unlike Braga and the other monster children, ghouls did not age to maturity in the span of a single year. There will definitely be problems. Having one child is already a handful, but having 2 or 3 children at once terror, and there are many who are raising a child for the first time, including Bilder. Zadyrus, there were no nurseries like on Earth, nor were the books, television programs or the internet to refer to in order to learn how to raise a child. As Terra and Zadyrus had experienced raising children before, they were concerned that there would be mothers who would suffer from maternity-related anxiety. Well, that didn't necessarily mean that having only one child would prevent maternity-related anxiety, however. So then I think it would be best to explain about contraception while I make the magic items. Vandali, you're right. Unlike humans, our lifespans are long. It's good for us to have many children, but we should be fine having a child once every 5 or 10 years. Bastia, for humans, especially for those living in farming communities, there would be circumstances where they wouldn't have the luxury of spacing out their children because it was a lot of work to raise them, and they probably didn't understand the concept of family planning anyway. Because medical technology was not well developed, there would be a strong notion that they should have as many children as possible while they were still young and healthy. But as Basdia said, ghouls had long lifespans, so it would be easy to convince the ghouls to adopt this policy. Humans would have opposed this strongly, however. But can the men hold themselves back? I think once every 5 or 10 years is impossible. Bastia, that is why it will be an accessory that can be put on and taken off. It can be put on only when wishing to have children. Terra, it would be a reverse contraception device. So what kind of accessory will you make it? Bastia, right now, I'm thinking of making it a pendant or a band that goes around the thigh. Vandali, the shape and part of the body that the magic item would be worn on was very important. These factors would affect the difficulty of creating the item with alchemy, the materials required and the strength of its effect when completed. For example, if there were a magic item that allowed one to walk on air as if it were the ground, would it not be likely that most people would expect such a magic item to be a pair of shoes? At the very least, nobody would think it would be a pair of glasses. In contrast, if there were a magic item that allowed one to see through objects while it was worn, most people would expect it to be a pair of glasses, not shoes. In this way, certain shapes and where the magic item would be worn would make it easier to create the item and produce a stronger effect, depending on what kind of effect was desired. Something that granted physical strength would be a ring or armlet. Something that granted some kind of vision would be glasses or, alternatively, a circlet. Something that let one run at high speeds would be shoes or an anklet. Of course, magic items such as socks that allowed one to see in the dark apparently existed, but creating such items would require a high level in alchemy skill and expensive materials. At present, there were more alchemical materials available than food. The reason for this was that anything that they obtained from hunting monsters, they had to use themselves. There was no adventurer's guild to take magic stones to, so Braga and the other monster children had been playing with them like marbles. However, Vandali, the only one who could create a death attribute magic item, had a skill level of 1 in alchemy. Creating a band that went around the thigh close to the abdomen or a pendant that would hang similarly close was the limit of his ability. He also had the option of making it a belt, but the ghouls didn't have a culture of wearing belts, so it might have made the use of the magic item unpopular. Vandali would find it difficult to create an item that would be worn even closer to the relevant body parts than that. So, are there any colors or designs that you like? Vandali had included Bazdia and the other women in this discussion to ask them this. Since they would be the ones wearing it, it would be best to ask them for their preferences in color or shape. Because of its intended function, it would be constantly worn during intercourse, after all. Let's see, everyone likes white, black, silver and gold. Bazdia: I don't think anyone likes seeing red unless it's in battle. Woman: I think everyone likes things that look like wings. Also, hearts, maybe. Woman: Bazdia and the others offered their opinions on what ghoul women liked. Vandali had no confidence in his sense of fashion, so this was greatly helpful. Incidentally, in Lambda, the heart was apparently a symbol of the goddess Vida, as to be expected of the goddess of the light attribute. However, a black heart would be a bad omen, so perhaps silver would be better? For now, we shall try making some. Terra: I'm counting on you. Vandali: the ones actually making the objects would be Terra and the other ghoul craftswoman. Creating a magic item required the alchemy skill, but that was simply imbuing an object with magic. The object itself was generally made by another craftsman. There were some alchemists that did everything on their own, from gathering materials to creating the items themselves, but those were exceptionally unusual. So what will you do for the magic item that keeps the fetus alive? It would be problematic for this one to be something that can be easily taken off. Zadyrus had been whispering, gold and silver? Youngsters these days sure like their shiny things, but now she asked this question, and Vandali replied, this is a little problematic. As Zadyrus said, it would be better for this magic item to be difficult to remove. If it accidentally came off and was lost, or the mother forgot to put it on and the baby died, it would be seriously problematic. But that didn't mean that it could be something put inside the body. The two of them nodded as they thought about this. How about a tattoo? Zadyrus: a piercing, after all. Vandali: both. They both looked at each other after coming up with totally different answers. Boy: a piercing would be too far from the abdomen. A tattoo will not disappear, and it can be applied anywhere. Zadyrus: the piercing wouldn't be on the ears, nose or lips, but on the belly button. As for tattoos, who would apply the tattoos to begin with? Vandali: it seemed that ghouls hadn't come up with the idea of piercing their belly buttons. And Vandali hadn't thought of the idea of making a magic item out of a tattoo engraved onto the body. And then after discussion, they settled on using belly button piercings. If we use tattoos, won't they become strangely distorted when the stomach expands? The baby would have grown big enough by the time that happens, but reapplying the tattoo every time you want to become pregnant wouldn't be an option. In that case, I think piercings are better. Bazdia: and so Bazdia's opinion was accepted. Incidentally, the idea that piercings were applied on the neck and above was something that not only ghouls, but the entirety of Lambda possessed. Belly button piercings would spread and become greatly popular, starting in Taylorsheim, but that would be a story set in the distant future. From then on, Vandali lived a lifestyle that was more lenient than usual, but still harsh on a 3-year-old boy. He would typically rest 1 day a week, and if one of the pregnant women went into labor on that day, he would still have to attend. He would take 3 hours rest the next day to compensate. With this as the basic rhythm of his lifestyle, he spent his time continuing to repair and maintain the city of Taylorsheim, as well as training in unarmed combat while waiting for Terra and the other craftswomen to create prototypes for the magic items. The repairing and maintenance were simple. Get up, join together, get out. Vandali: he just needed to use Seglum transmutation. The pieces of rubble on the ground would grow arms and legs to move, join together, change their shape and return to their original form. Constructing a building from scratch would still be difficult, but fixing one that had crumbled a little was simple. Thanks to the carpentry skill, Vandali had a general idea of what he needed to do. In Lambda, apparently the same skill was used to build both pit dwellings for ghouls and stone houses for titans. Not only did Vandali repair the buildings, he also used the engineering skill to repair and maintain the roads and sewer system. Taylorsheim had no waterworks system, but it did have a sewer system. They used a water purifying magic item to purify and use as manure. Of course, since 200 years had passed, this system was unusable without some work being done on them. Vandali turned the ground surface into golems to expose the sewer pipes, turned those pipes into golems as well to repair the cracks and remove any blockages, and applied the anti-degradation spell that he had learned after his skills leveled up before putting the ground back. He supplied mana to the water-purifying magic items. He had Bone Man and the other undead exterminate the unknown sludge-like monsters that had grown in the vats that were used for fermenting waste. With all of these completed, the sewer system finally became usable again. They would have to draw water to use from wells and waterways, but it was very convenient to simply be able to discard any used water. After being alive in Lambda for 3 years, Vandali realized just how great the sewer systems of Earth were. He was especially appreciative of this because he had been Japanese. After making everything usable again, he intended to have them maintained automatically by golems. Vandali was thoroughly taught the basics of unarmed combat by Bazdia. Your physical strength is almost no different to an adult ghoul's, Van. Let's practice as if it were a real battle. Bazdia. He learned numerous patterns as well as how to defend and dodge with his body. Bazdia swept his legs, kicked him, threw him around, stomped on him. He was surprisingly overwhelmed one-sidedly. Even though he wasn't using any magic, it made him doubt whether he really had the strength of an adult ghoul. You have an aptitude for this and you're sensitive to bloodthirst, but your attacks are forced and monotonous, Van. You'll become stronger if you move more quickly and use some feints. Also, you have to always predict your opponent's next movement. Bazdia knew that Vandali panicked when scolded harshly and that he disliked being taught in a spiritual way. So while she hadn't gone easy on him in the training, she made sure to speak in a gentle tone while teaching him. And so Vandali was able to take these lessons with composure. He had been completely reliant on magic for defense up until now, and his attacks had been monotonous in that he simply used his overwhelming amount of mana to push his way to victory. Some of this couldn't be helped because of how young his body was, and he himself thought that there was no other way. He had never even gotten into a fight as a Japanese person, and after that he had become a laboratory animal in origin who could do nothing but rampage around like a beast. He had been under the impression that unarmed fighting and martial arts were too distant for him to reach. But thanks to his father in this world, he apparently had surprisingly strong muscles. What's really amazing is how you don't close your eyes. I took 3 months to learn not to close my eyes even when my face was attacked, but you haven't been closing your eyes right from the beginning, Van. You have incredible talent. Bazdia. Thank you. Vandali. His forehead and cheeks had been hit, though lightly, so his face was pinker than usual, but Vandali's eyes stayed open. Knowing that he could close his eyes and use spirit form transformation to see using his spirit form eyes seemed to influence his instincts and reflexes. The pregnant women would go into labor every few days, and Vandali attended every single baby's delivery. Things like the umbilical cord wrapping around the baby's neck didn't happen every time. They proceeded normally, that is, with the usual struggles, drama and emotions that humans experienced, and the babies were born safely. Things seemed to proceed well for the ghouls after birth as well, including Bilder. This was likely to do with the fact that ghouls had more robust bodies than humans and the fact that this place was half Devil's Nest. The veterans who had experienced childbirth before like Zadyrus and Terra were teaching them various things regarding life after giving birth, so it seemed that things would go well. It was the middle of July when things became truly busy with the magic item creation process. Imbuing magic in the items that Terra had created turned out to be quite difficult. Repairing an entire castle wall would have been far easier than this. At this rate, making 3 magic items in a day is my limit. Vandali, your skill is still level 1, is it not, boy? This is a sufficient pace. Zadyrus, if you make them too fast, the pace at which I make the items will not be able to keep up. Making accessories is outside my area of expertise, after all. Terra, there were roughly 600 ghouls needing these magic items. At this rate, it would take over 300 days to make magic items for everyone. However, not all of the ghouls wanted children right now, so there seemed to be no need to hurry. And by your calculations, you would be making magic items for Terra and I as well. Or could it be that this is your roundabout way of making a confession? Zadyrus, oh my, I mustn't, even though I look young, I am over 260 years old. However, if Vansama wished for it Terra, you shouldn't tease a 3-year-old boy. If you say such things too often, I'll really take you up on your words in a decade or two. Vandally, the creation of the magic items continued with enjoyable conversations like these, using the powdered organs and magic stones of defeated monsters. Ah, the magic stone that Vandally just crushed, was it a noble orcs? And Vandally tried various things in his spare time. And the fish and fermentation. Since there were no soybeans, he tried making fish sauce from fish. He hadn't gone out of his way to invent fish sauce in origin, but he succeeded making it after 3 tries now. The fish sauce was smelly and a little harsh, but herbs could be added to make it lighter. Next, he tried using walnuts and acorns to make walnut miso and acorn miso, and found it a little difficult. He succeeded in fermenting it using magic, but he wasn't entirely satisfied with the resulting flavor. The researchers who squeezed the mana out of Vandally had tried using him to make miso before, so this was one of his strong points, but it was his first time making it from walnuts and acorns. It's not as tasty as it was said to be on Earth, I guess. But it contains the walnuts flavor and acorns fragrance, so I suppose this is alright as it is? Vandally didn't know that the walnut miso on Earth didn't use salt and walnuts as a substitute for miso, but simply added walnuts to already made miso. However, he had made something with a flavor that he was content with, so he cast maturation in it to deepen its flavor and shared it with everyone. Also, wasabi and ginger were discovered in the partial Devil's Nest Talersheim, so they were quickly cultivated. Well, for ginger, it was just a matter of turning the areas where it grew into fields and occasionally applying fertilizer. This alone allowed them to harvest ginger every week. Devil's Nests were truly wonderful places. The cultivation of wasabi took some intervention. Wasabi released a toxic component that prevented other plants from growing in its vicinity, but the components affected the growth of the wasabi itself and prevented it from growing larger. Vandally came up with a scheme where he imbued stakes with the detoxification spell that neutralized the wasabi's toxic components in the area where the stakes were planted. It was quite a failure, but also something of a success. The ghouls and titans would have to go around the devil's nests and find new wasabi to use. Also, Vandally tried creating Jenga. All he needed to do was turn some lumber into wood columns and split them into pieces of the same size. It was even simpler than making boards and pieces for reversi. This fish sauce, could this be the legendary soy sauce? The sauce spoken of in legends, the one that the champion Zakar tried and failed to create new Aza. Whatever it is, it's tasty. Porcus, soy sauce was more difficult to create than miso, even the champion Zakar had difficulties in recreating it. He had apparently succeeded in recreating miso, but Bellwood had set the miso warehouses on fire before miso could become widespread. That would explain why almost nobody knew that miso existed. Bellwood didn't allow it. Ginger and wasabi had apparently been used in food from the beginning. But everyone was happy that it was cultivated and could be harvested reliably. And Jenga became a trending thing in Talersheim just as Reversi had. No carpenters among the titans had become undead, so the ghouls and undead titans approached Vandally with monster meat and offered him a trade for Jenga pieces. Could it be that I could live a peaceful life just by making flavorings and toys? Vandally, the trading was primitive, but it seemed that life would become fulfilling for him. The first stage of magic item creation was completed, and around the time Talersheim had returned to its appearance of being a white fortress city, it was the end of summer in September, when the footsteps of autumn could be heard. Now then, I'll be going into the dungeons starting today. Vandally, and so Vandally was finally beginning his adventures to earn experience points. The levels of the alchemy, carpentry, engineering and cooking skills have increased. A long dining table had been prepared in a dark, unknown location. A red fluid was poured into wine glasses and shared among those gathered here. They were dressed in elegant clothes that would sell for enough money for a normal family to live in luxury for a year and over-decorated with jewelry. One might think that this would be some banquet for noblemen, but the ones gathered here were not noblemen in the normal sense of the word. An air of elegance and nobility appeared to be drifting from them. The men and women here were beautiful, perhaps ephemeral in appearance. It was possible that everyone here possessed both profound beauty and intelligence. But in reality, they were cold-hearted, merciless, cruel demons who thirsted for blood. Now then, let us begin the meeting. The first topic of discussion is the aforementioned damp vampire, with his crimson eyes sparkling with joy. The pure-breed vampire who led the discussion moistened his throat with the fresh blood that had been poured into his glass. Chapter 36, Spartan Training Supported with Praise. The most peaceful, prosperous age that the world of Lamdu ever experienced, the age of the gods. The ones who ended it were the demon king.
Okay, guys. Excuse me. So yeah. Okay, I'll end it here for today. And so far, so good, I might say. This is getting really, really interesting, I think. And I really enjoyed blending the building up the back and also adding some more details on the ocean. I hope that I can uh, add a bit more color on the back on the buildings on the background. Maybe a bit more green or something. Or I'm not very sure yet because I'm looking at on the reference. The details will be kind of exaggerated if I add more color. Mm, uh, but I think the values and the what you call this, the values and the details for so far are pretty much solid in my taste. It's just lacking a bit of color, I think. I'm not sure. So I'll just look at some reference after this and yeah, check out if I can add something new on this. I kind of like the seaweed I added on the edges of the rocks over here. uh, but yeah, maybe add some gray, more gray on the rocks, so that it would be more, it could be differentiated better than compared to the building styles. Oh, I have some few mistakes here. I'm gonna fix that next time. But yeah, I'll probably add some more variation. And also, for the character, I might, if you saw me doing it earlier, I was cleaning it up. I'll definitely clean up the weapon also. It's kinda a bit messy with the line art. Mm, Add some probably few highlights and maybe add some few more details over here. Depends. But yeah, the texture is really good already. Mm, the gloves, yeah, the gloves are pretty good already. So I'll probably edit my shrimp, me, as the avatar. Part of the avatar. Add a bit of color adjustment on the shrimp, maybe. Depends. I'm not very sure because my uh, XP pen tablet, which I'm drawing on right now. By the way, I'm using an XP pen screen tablet, uh, Artist 12. It's been with me for 3 years now, or 4. I think it's going 4. Yeah, it's very interesting material equipment that I've been using for a while now, and it's being very helpful. And so, for me, I think this is much better compared to the regular tablet because I can see it clearly. But the problem is the the coloration or the lighting and values is kind of different in this screen compared to my other screen that I'm using. So I'm opening my other screen right now, and my other screen I can see uh, my design here is a bit too vibrant, I think, especially the characters too vibrant. Maybe I should adjust the vibrancy a bit more or add some more depth on the character so that it will be too too bright, or uh, I'll see. Like I said earlier, before, guys, I'm not yet a professional artist, but I'm getting there, hopefully. And this is some of my practices, and I'm just grinding right now. Hopefully, I can reach the level that I'm wanting to achieve, and get a bit more experience so that I can achieve more of my goals. But so far, I could say that I'm improving compared to me a few months ago when I started doing this concept arts. It's really gone very nice. Mhm. I really like environments. Not very into buildings, but most of the concept arts I did back then were all skyscrapers and city areas, buildings and stuff, because it was part of my work. My boss asked me to do, so I went and started doing that first. But most of my tastes in designing, I like backgrounds like with forests, faunas and stuff, even landscapes, mountains and glaciers. They look so awesome for me. It's very natural. Nature is beautiful. That's why uh, I really enjoy making this kind of stuff compared to making the buildings. But I'm not saying buildings are like skyscrapers or sci-fi stuff are not really appealing to me, but they are, yeah, but in a different level. And but this is more natural. I really like the ruins I did. Still has the aesthetic of it being a building, but kind of merging on the background with the environment. Mhm. Okay, okay. I think I've said a lot of things about the artwork right now. Okay, how about the story, guys? Did you enjoy the story? I hope you did, because I am enjoying it already, and I'm very excited on reaching what you call this, reaching the latest parts. No, actually, there are some parts that will be revealed midway that I really love. I enjoy the story so much that uh, there will be some developments about the people that murdered him before, and those guys arriving uh, in the land of Landa. It will be very interesting. That was one of my favorite parts of the story when I read it before, and now I'm really excited of getting back to that part. And just look forward to the story, how it develops, guys. It's wonderful. Really has wonderful developments. Hmm. It's not like other light novels that I've read that are too simple and um, not very I might say too much, not very mature. This story is very mature. There's that and some few R18 stuff that's happening, but not that very R18 stuff, but just mildly now, like the prostitutes and stuff that he needed to fix. It's kind of sad, I know. I I feel really bad for the women's in this story sometimes, but I really like how he can uh, go and fix it up, find ways with using his dark magic and stuff. Undead magic, not dark magic. Yeah. So there will be more developments for his abilities, especially right now that he finally gained a job. A J, yeah, he changed his job, well, well, more like acquiring his job. So right now it's a loophole from the curse that he got from the god that cursed him. And it's really nice that he can actually learn skills that not yet existed. And so he's inventing skills, inventing jobs that will definitely be shown in the near future. It will be very interesting, guys. That's what I'm gonna say only. I won't spoil it too much. So yeah, when we get into those parts, there will be a lot of hype and a lot of uh, combat, and those are the one of the most interesting parts of this story, especially when he takes his revenge. I really like some this kind of type of storytelling with some few revenge plots on the way. But he's not too like over the head wanting to get his revenge. He's just preparing also. It's just up to his enemies if they want to go to his place and ask for trouble. He's just gonna retaliate. Sorry, retaliate. How do you pronounce that word again? Anyway, he fights back. Let's just make it simple. Okay, guys. So far, this has been a bit of a long stream already. So, thank you once again for watching. Hope you would hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed what you heard, what you listened, and what you've seen here. And hope that you would learn something from this if you were trying to be a artist also, because I really enjoyed sharing some of my skills to other artists who are trying to get to a higher level also, or just providing some examples. If you're a professional artist and you've seen my work, I know it's a bit of a mess up, it's still a mess, but I would appreciate if you can give me some pointers where to improve. If you're watching this, whoever you are. Anyways, thank you very much again, guys, for being here. And once again, just keep improving, keep on trying your best to learn art, because it's a very enjoyable process. It will take some time, but the grind is real. The grind needs to be processed so that you can achieve success one day. So yeah. Okay, guys. Won't talk anymore. Won't talk much anymore. And once again, thank you. And this is your boy Shrimp signing off.